First strike, first look here on VSiN. Yes, the UFC is back after a full month layoff. We are back, which means I get to be joined by our guy, Lou Finocchiaro. You can follow Lou as I do at GamLou and the host of the About Business podcast. Lou, it is great to see you and talk to you again. I know my mother was waiting for us to come back. She misses the fight game. So if mom misses the fight game, I know the general public does. How jacked are you to get back in there as we really begin 2023 in earnest with the UFC and MMA at large?
Dave, I'm quite excited. Thanks for having me on. We start a new year, and we're coming out of a year where favorites in the UFC traditionally running about 63%. In 22, they ran 67%. So a high spike with the favorites last year. That's a considerable spike from what it normally is. And so I'll be looking for a little bit of a return to normalcy, we hope. But there's plenty on the horizon, great fights scheduled, and we start with a card this weekend.
And it starts right here at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas with Nassourdine Imavov. Was looking for an opponent, thought he had one in Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum had to be postponed and back out of this fight. And now you get Sean Strickland back in, fresh off his fight against Jared Cannonier. What did you make of this one replacement now for, we had to get a main event here, so Strickland steps in. And Sean right now is minus $1.05, and Imavov right now is minus $1.15. When you change those opponents last second, how do you think it affects the favorite? Because Nassourdine was a much bigger favorite against Gastelum than he is against Sean Strickland.
That's correct. And this line's only been out for a little while. And actually the opener was Imavov minus 170. So you can see there's been flow immediately bringing this to pick'em, which I think is a little bit more accurate depiction of this fight. On the detriment for Strickland is the fact that he's lost his last two. But if you look at Pereira, now champion, and Cannonier just a month ago, elite fighters within the middleweight division. Now this fight, because of its nature and short notice situation, Gastelum pulling out is going to be at 205, not 185. 185-pound middleweight fighters are going to compete at the weight class above to make it fair to Strickland so he doesn't have to kill himself a month after he just fought. Usually Strickland, the taller, longer guy, not in this case. Imavov is going to be. Imavov, on the other hand, was looking at a fight with a guy in Gastelum that he was going to be 5 inches taller than, had a 4 or 5 inch reach advantage, and really was set up to look to put on a sparkling performance, in my opinion. Now he gets short notice change. A guy in Strickland that is hard to fight. He's unafraid. He talks constantly. Very, very busy. Very, very accurate. And Imavov, in his 3-round fights, what we've seen of him thus far is that he can tire. Ain't no tire in Strickland's game. We just watched him go 5 rounds with Jared Cannonier. So it's a fascinating setup. I think the odds right now are relatively reflective of a good close fight, but I lean to Strickland here a little bit. And when I look at the total in the fight, Dave just pulled off DraftKings 4.5 over minus 130. That's not an overwhelming indication for decision. And because Imavov has that history of tiring a little bit, I wouldn't put it past Strickland with that immense amount of volume to eventually accrue enough damage to maybe finish the guy.
Hey, you want that under right now, 4.5 rounds. That's minus $1.10 here if you think that can get done before we get into those championship rounds, and certainly that 5th and final round potentially in a main event. You mentioned the weight, right? Now that you're going to be fighting at more weight than these guys are accustomed to, so Sean doesn't have to cut that 20 pounds, and you can fight this at 205. Does that favor one guy or the other, that you're not going to be fighting at your traditional 185?
Normally, again, if it was the larger man striking against the smaller guy, I'd say it helps him with his takedown defense. And if it was a wrestler against a striker, even size, I'd say it helps the wrestler. But while Strickland may be benefited by the fact that he doesn't have to cut the weight, so is Imavov. And Imavov's 6'2". He's 2 inches 6'3". He's 2 inches taller than Strickland. So I don't see the weight differences being a huge advantage for either, especially given the fact, Dave, that I just don't think either of these two guys, unless they get rung, are going to grapple, wrestle, or clasp.
I'll be fascinated to see where this number moves when we have our full hour conversation on First Strike on Friday here in the network. But that's where the numbers reside today. We'll see if there's a lot of line movement here in the next 72 hours. The co-main event of this one could be explosive whenever you have Dan 50K Ige on the card against Damon Jackson here. Ige right now a small favorite at minus $1.25. Damon Jackson right now plus $1.05. How do you see this right now on a Tuesday here? First look. What do you think these numbers look like to you?
First blush, you see Ige, who's won one fight in his last 5. And so initially you look like he's a downbound train. You look at Jackson, who's won 4 or 5 in a row and looks like spectacular, especially since Damon Jackson's last fight was against an up-and-coming rough and tough Philly grappler, Pat Sabatini, and he finished him in the first round. I think that the market, even the makers, are putting too much into recency, and I think Ige is not getting enough premium for who he's been in with. And I think Jackson may be getting a little too much shine for that one fight. Great work, albeit over Pat Sabatini. And based on who Ige's been in with, the fact that he lives in Vegas, trains there, I think this is a really, really good spot for him. And this line is slowly climbing. I expect by the end of the week, Ige should be priced closer to how at least I view this fight, and that's minus 150, minus 160 maybe. Right now you can get him at minus 120, and I would advise taking Ige minus 120 right now. In fact, I'll make it an official release. It's going to be the release that I send out tomorrow on the Digital Point Spread Weekly. So I'll give it to everyone now because I want you to get the price now as opposed to what it could be later in the week.
And there's the advantage of being a VSiN Pro subscriber right there. You're going to get Lou's numbers here early before these numbers change. And that's why we do the exercise each and every week here on a Tuesday, First Strike, First Look, to get the better of the number, as Lou just pointed out there. You're going to get the better of the number on the Ige side today because to Lou's point, this number may go up precipitously here before we get to Friday and certainly Saturday on fight day. That total, by the way, Lou, right now, you can understand why here in a potential 3-round matchup, the over is juiced minus $1.85 I'm seeing here on a Tuesday. Does that number go up, or do you think Ige is finishing potential here in this potential 3-round bout?
I do think Ige has finishing potential, but he's not really known for his power. And the way to put Damon Jackson away is via body attack. You know, if you beat the body, the head will follow. That will have to be the path that Ige takes, and it's going to take a while to chop down that tree. I would tend to think that the thing is going to go over, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Ige is able to finish Damon Jackson. Jackson has been finished before.
All right, Lou, we got a very interesting card here. We want to go through some of these fights here with Roman Kopylov against Punahele Soriano here. Soriano right now minus $1.50. Kopylov right now plus $1.30. Rocky Pennington's back on this card. She's coming in against Ketlin Vieira. Vieira is surprising to me, only at a minus $1.20 against the veteran in Rocky Pennington. Very quickly on those fights, and we'll go even to some of the earlier fights in the prelims card. What do you make of those two? Pretty evenly matched, at least on paper, at least the odds makers. Not any huge favorite in those two.
No, and Pennington and Vieira's tough. I lean to Pennington just because of her grit and her experience. Vieira tends to be a little bit inactive, and if things go into decision and it's lined like it's a no-brain cinch that it is, then I think that Pennington would be a worthy choice. In the other fight, you got 2 middleweights, journeymen. Why are they in a co-main or just under the co-main event position? I'll tell you why, because neither one of these guys is going to do anything but stand in the middle and swing. I think Soriano's got a little bit more power, and he's also got more ways to win. Kopylov, dubious defense. I think Soriano is the rightful favorite here, and he opened a little higher than he is now, Dave. He opened 180, and he's sifted down to 150 or 55. Soriano would be a good look, too.
Very interesting. We mentioned the ladies' fights. The first one of the card, Priscilla Cachoeira is going to take on the Sarge. Sijara Eubanks is back in there, and Sijara is a big favorite here for the Sarge, minus 230. First fight of the night, Lou. Is that too big a price tag for you?
I think it is. Sarge opens 160, goes to 230. Now she's back at 135. She didn't have success there, so she moved to 125. Didn't have success there. She's bouncing back up. She's also now 30 some years old. And so Kachera, what she does have is very little skill, but tremendous heart, tremendous granite beard. For a woman, she can take a shot, but she's got unbelievable power. Sarge is coming off a finish in her last fight. I don't understand the line movement here. And then when we look at the total, if we'll look at the total of that fight, 1.5, the over -150. Rarely do we see women's fight with a 1.5. That's always 2.5 shaded heavily to the over. I think Cachoeira has a chance to finish Eubanks. The props aren't out yet, but that's what I'll be looking for later in the week.
Right now, that under, as you mentioned, Lou, they're normally always painted 2.5. It is 1.5 to your point, plus $1.20 in that first fight of the night. All right, Lou, before we sign off for First Strike, First Look today, give me another fight on the card. Maybe you've seen some interesting line moves or one that you still think there's value here on a Tuesday.
Yeah, let's see. Let's go to Razak Al-Hassan. Again, I'm picking on these fights with the bigger fighters because there's only 3 fights at 170 and above. The rest are tiptoers. So Razak Al-Hassan from Ghana, Ribeiro, the debuting fighter from Brazil. More importantly, here's a 1.5 total shaded under -230 in a fight where the two guys are a pick'em. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out here that rather than take one guy or the other, let's find one guy inside the distance or the other guy inside the distance, take a huge price, and go that way if the line makers are so sure this thing's going under. Ribeiro has had like 10 fights, and 8 of them, he's won 8. Ribeiro's had like 12 fights. He's won 10, 8 by finish. And Razak El-Hassan, later stages of his career, all he's ever had is power, and that's all he's going to have in this one. So maybe one of those two guys finishes the other. I think that's the way it's going to go, or at least that's the way I'm going to look at it.
Somebody feels like they're going to sleep at UFC Apex in that small ring that they have there at UFC Apex. So those guys are not going to be far. They're going to be in that phone booth come Saturday night. Very quickly, Lou, before we sign off for First Strike, First Look today, there was big news in the MMA world. And you and I are old boxing guys, and now we've been, MMA guys for the last decade or so. Jake Paul, going from a YouTube sensation to a boxer, and now is going to make the next segue to the PFL, signing a deal with them. First of all, what do you make of it? And are we going to have to take him seriously in the handicapping game once he gets into PFL?
I've tried not to, but now we must. Listen, here's a guy that's taught himself how to fight slowly by opening his yapper and making a lot of money doing it. I wish I was so smart, for crying out loud. And not only that, he's not afraid of Dana. Dana is hidden under a rock right now for reasons everyone knows. But this kid, the other fighters like what he's doing. He's bringing light and attention to the plight of UFC fighters who are getting abused. So really, he has more fans than enemies, and I'm beginning to have to respect the young man.
It's absolutely amazing to see what's happened, literally from a YouTube sensation to boxing, fighting old UFC guys per se, to get his name in there, and now signing with the PFL. So he's got a stake in ownership, I do believe, with the PFL. So it'll be very interesting to see Jake Paul as he now progresses into mixed martial arts. Lou, it's always great to be back talking with you. We will do it again for the full hour on Friday on First Strike. And again, follow Lou on Twitter as I do at Gamblue. And very quickly, before we sign off, tell the people what they get when they check out the Bout Business podcast.
A short, brief synopsis of each week's UFC final releases per Gamblue. Short, sweet, to the point. And thank you for mentioning it, Dave.
And already gave out Dan 50K EGA here at -$1.25 before that price changes. There he is, Lou Finocchiaro, everybody. We'll see you right back here for the full hour. First Strike on VSiN. Thanks for watching First Strike. Of course, subscribe on YouTube, and we always have First Strike First Look for you each and every Tuesday as we give you the best of the numbers before we get to First Strike each and every Friday. So download on iHeart, Apple, or your favorite podcast. Thanks for watching First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.